All right, we are live. I am going to press send on a couple of these and then we will get started. Let me get more banners up. All right, thanks folks for joining us. We're just getting situated and we will be started here soon. We got 4 viewers. Anybody who's in, feel free to announce who you are or leave comments, and we are good to go. So without further ado, I am going to get us started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Shane Rogers, and I am the Farm to Plate Communications Manager at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. And I have the distinct pleasure of running the Rooted in Vermont campaign. And I am coming to you live from the Vermont Wild Kitchen, which is a collaboration between Rooted in Vermont and Vermont Fish and Wildlife. So tonight, I have joining me in the kitchen game warden Abby Sarah, and she is going to be cooking up a feast of wonderful venison dishes. You're also going to see myself in the kitchen cooking up some bubble and squeak with some local cabbage and potatoes and other veggies, and a fun winter foraged cocktail for you. So, like I said, this is the Vermont Wild Kitchen. We've done a couple of these episodes in the past, and we are officially kicking off a month-by-month episode kick. So every month you can expect the Vermont Wild Kitchen to be streaming live from either my kitchen and kitchens around the state. And we're going to be diving into a ton of different amazing wild ingredients that folks can find right here in Vermont. So without further ado, for folks who are tuning in, again, thank you. Please feel free to leave comments, ask questions of especially Warden Sarah, because she is a wealth of knowledge, not only in the kitchen, but out in the field. And we're going to throw it over to Abby to get us started. So welcome, Abby. And I am going to switch this off. It's all you.
Okay. So tonight, I'm going to kind of be getting into some different cuts on the deer and how to prepare those. But the main thing that we're going to be preparing tonight is venison mac and cheese, venison barbecue mac and cheese. And then later on, hopefully, some spicy heart kebabs and maybe some tongue sandwiches as well. So before we kind of dive into it, it's really important to know what part of the deer you're getting your meat off of. There are certain areas like the shanks on a deer can be pretty tough depending on how you cook them. And there are other areas like the backstrap that are very tender, and the backstrap makes great steak. You know, it doesn't take much cooking, just a quick pan fry, and it's good to go. But there are other cuts like the shank and other tougher cuts that take a lot longer to cook and to be tender. So the cuts that I use for the venison tonight, for the barbecued venison, were two different cuts off the deer. Actually 3 different cuts, but one of them was prepared to crock pot style, so it's shredded venison, barbecued, and the meat for that came off of the shank, and then also a roast off of the hindquarters. So
Hey, Abby.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. We got someone that says they can't hear you. Do you mind just trying to project a little bit louder? Sometimes it gets cavernous in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just saying that the shank on a deer can be pretty tough, and that's one of the cuts that I used for this barbecued dish tonight. And I'll show you. Let me grab it here. So this is one that I have not cooked. This is a raw shank, and this is the cut of meat that I use. One of the cuts for the pulled venison. Now you can see this is the lower leg on the deer. This is a rear shank, so it came off one of the rear legs. Down here would be the bone that goes to the hoof, and then up here the rest of the leg. So this cut is notoriously tough. It's great in the crock pot. So this is actually my favorite cut of meat on a deer, surprisingly, if it's crock potted. It is the most delicious meat. It's almost like the dark meat on a leg of a chicken. It doesn't taste like chicken, but it's kind of the same. It's a little bit darker than the rest of the deer most of the time. So first thing I want to do with this is cut off this end here because my crock pot's not big enough for that. So what I'll do is just kind of cut through the tissue, because you can't really saw through tissue, and then this tendon here, cut through that. And then I'll grab my saw. And this saw is a little overkill for this little cut here. This saw is like for cutting an animal in half. It's pretty big. And if you just make a score on the leg, sometimes you can just break it. I don't have much draw room here, so we'll try to break it now. So I snapped it off, and then we'll just cut the rest of the way through. Now you see there's some bone dust on here. That's kind of crunchy. It can be crunchy, so typically what I'll do is just rinse that off before I put it in the crock pot. But you can see that nice marrow coming out of there. So a lot of people don't cook with bone. They debone all their meat. But there's a lot of value in cooking with the bone in, because all that nice fat in the marrow there, that comes out whenever you slow cook it, and it helps flavor the meat. So venison is very, very lean meat to begin with. So any sort of fat like that that's in the marrow is great to have. So what I do is throw that in the crock pot. I can throw other cuts in too. I had a roast that I also threw in there, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's crock potted. So I'll grab it. So it comes out like this. There's also a lot of juice. You can see here in my crock pot, if you flip it around, there's a lot of juice in there that's left over. And what I'll do is I will put that stuff in a container like this and use it later for stock for soup. So you don't want to throw that good stuff away. But for our purposes tonight, we only want the meat. So what I'll do first, I'll take a couple forks, and we'll kind of just shred the meat up a little bit. You can take your hands and do it too. That's easier, because we're making barbecued venison, so we want to, this stuff we want to just shred up, kind of like pulled pork in a way. So we'll get that all done. I made the barbecue sauce ahead of time. There is a recipe that I use loosely. It involves ketchup, some sugar, cider vinegar, a bunch of different spices, including paprika, onion, garlic, some salt, and a little bit of molasses, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. And then you let that kind of simmer on the stove for a little bit, and it makes some great barbecue sauce. So you can make your own, or you can just buy some from the store if you want to do that. But if you have some ketchup kicking around, most of the other ingredients. So you can see this was the hind roast, and these are the shanks right here, the shank meat. See how it's a little darker? But this stuff's really, really, really tasty. It's my favorite. Okay, so once I get it shredded up, sometimes there's a little bit, see that little bit of tendon on the end? You can just pull that off because it'll be a little chewy. Oh, but before I go on, I just want to mention that it's got a slow cook for about 8 hours. If you turn your crock pot on high, it can take like 5 hours. But what I do is I'll throw it in the crock pot before I go to bed on low, and then it'll be done in the morning. So, and when you put it in the crock pot, you don't just want to put the meat in by itself. You want to put in some onions, some garlic, some celery, maybe a couple carrots for flavor, and salt, pepper, and then put water so it's almost covering the meat. That's really important because that will keep the meat nice and tender and moist. Oops, sorry, Tyler. Okay.
I love putting the crock pot on in the morning, and then when I went into work, I should say, coming back home to that smell was always just amazing, whether that was venison or any other type of wild game or Vermont raised game.
Yeah, it is delicious. And when I woke up this morning, I had my crock pot last night, and I was like, oh man, it smells so good. Okay, so I'll turn the burner on, And I'm just heating this up a little bit. I'll pour the barbecue sauce on it, and I like to just kind of cook it just for a little bit to let it caramelize. I'll show you the sauce. This is the sauce that I made, and I do have the recipe right here for that. And I put a little less ketchup than I wrote down here, just because I don't like ketchup that much, and I like my sauce to be a little more vinegary. So you can kind of, it's not rocket science. You can kind of just do what you want, as long as you get the ratios relatively the same. If you want your sauce to be, you know, a lot more vinegary, just put less ketchup or more vinegar or whatever. So I'll do that. Okay. So we'll let that kind of simmer away, get it incorporated. I guess I didn't make quite enough sauce for all this meat.
So Abby, where did you get this meat from? Is this something that you hunted yourself, or was this a roadkill?
Was probably a roadkill. I have lots of roadkills I process for both for the department and just for myself as well. So, yeah, this one was a roadkill. And you know, roadkill makes just as good tasting venison dish as ones that you shoot yourself. Tyler.
Yeah, definitely.
My boyfriend doesn't agree, but he thinks himself.
I still have some meat left over from a processing clinic that you ran last year in Rutland when we could all get together. Yeah. And it was a trip to be able to process all the roadkill, and it was super informative. Do you do classes like that often, especially for folks who maybe don't have the background or were raised doing hunting?
Yeah, we did. We just had another class this fall, same location. So it went really well, and everybody got to take home some venison.
That's wonderful.
So now what I'm doing here is I'm going to start making what we call a roux. And it's about equal amounts butter to flour is what you want to start with. So this is the base of our mac and cheese sauce. So I'll put about that much butter in there. Turn this down a little bit because I don't want that stuff to burn. We'll start melting it out. And once it's melted, we'll add some flour to it and get it whisked up. And that's going to be the thickening agent. We'll add some milk to that and whisk that in. And once the milk's whisked in, we can add some seasoning to it, a little bit of salt and pepper. I like red pepper flakes in my stuff. I put it in pretty much everything because I like a little bit of heat in my food. So, grab some flour.
It's nice to be able to find flour again in the store.
Oh, I know.
How long did people go without being able to have access to it? Especially having King Arthur flour in Vermont, it was a trip.
Yeah, I know. There was a while there I was a little bit worried I was getting super low on flour. I was like, oh. I finally found some, but it wasn't King Arthur. It was like some other brand. Okay, so now the butter's all melted. We'll start gradually adding this so I'm going to turn this down. I always cook on high heat and burn everything. But we'll start gradually adding the flour in. And like I said, you want your heat to be on kind of like medium to low at this point because this stuff can burn pretty easy. Okay, so once we got the flour kind of mixed in like that, that's plenty. Grab my milk. You kind of got to go a little bit fast with this because once it dries up, it can burn easily. And just gradually add it in. Keep stirring it. And if there's lumps, you just can whisk them out. Lumps aren't the end of the world. And then once you've got the amount of sauce you want, you just kind of let it go and simmer a little bit, because that's what the heat tends to thicken it, the longer it sits there simmering. So if it's not quite thick enough, you can let it simmer longer, or you could add a little more flour. It's tricky to add flour after you've added the milk because it definitely can be lumpy if you do that, but I've done it before. It's not that bad if you add it slowly and whisk really hard. But sometimes I want to make more sauce than I initially put flour in for. And the flour is what thickens it. Okay, so we'll let that simmer for a bit.
So Abby, we had a question come in from Sharon who asked, what is the best way to tenderize a big old deer? Often find them a little bit tougher.
Yeah, so, like I was saying before, it depends on the cut. So the backstrap should never really be tough. I mean, the deer would have to be really old for that to be like super tough. So I always say the backstrap's a good cut to use for steak because it's more tender. If it's a really tough deer, slow cook it. I mean, like that's my solution to really tough deer. You could also pound it with a like one of those cube steak hammers, and tenderize it that way if you have a cut that you wanted for steak, for instance, but it was really tough. That's a solution.
That's what I was gonna say. The crock pot is like your best friend with any tough cut of meat. As long as you can cook it for a couple hours and some juices, it usually tenderizes right out.
Yeah, and there are certain cuts, like I said before, like the backstrap, the tenderloin, where you don't want to do that. Like, there's no sense in slow cooking the backstrap because it's already tender, and that's the cut. If you want to have steak, that's the place to take it from. Or the back of the leg is usually more tender. The steaks that come out of there are more tender than the front of the leg or even other parts of the deer. The front shoulders are usually tough. I typically will turn those into hamburger because they're pretty tough. Tougher than the rear legs for sure. Or you could do a bone-in roast or a deboned roast out of the front shoulders, which is another good solution for the front shoulders because roasts are usually slow cooked. But it really pays to know, what part of the deer you're taking your meat from. And with wild game, it's even more important to know that because there's very little fat on a wild animal. And on a deer, the fat that is there can be not that great for cooking purposes. I mean, it doesn't render out very well. So you don't really want to put a bunch of fat or keep a bunch of fat on your meat because it's a little bit tallowy and it's not like pork fat or beef fat. So you can see our barbecued venison is starting to come together here. Starting to get a little more caramelized. And I'm going to add, actually no, this looks pretty good. I was going to add a little more flour to it, but I don't think I will. So we'll go back to this burner. This is where I'll put it all together in here. I might add just a touch more flour. So this is what I was talking about. If it doesn't look quite thick enough, just whisk in a little more flour. This is kind of unconventional way to do it, but it works for me. I'm not a kitchen snob or cooking snob. I just do what works. Okay. So we got that going. We will stick some more butter in here. And the reason why I'm transferring it to this pot is because it's bigger. And by the end of this, we're going to have a lot of mac and cheese. So,
I don't know how many times I start with the smaller pot, then end up with the larger one and a larger one, and a sink full of dishes at the end too.
Yeah. So my boyfriend Tyler's always saying, "How do you make so many dirty dishes?" And I'm like, "Well, I cook."
We have a comment from Tim that says that he just shot a 3-pointer yesterday and had the inner tenderloins for lunch yesterday.
Yeah.
He says the inners are his absolute favorite, and he just usually cooks venison with onions and butter, and his fiance cooks it with grape jelly and onions and garlic powder. Have you ever cooked with grape jelly on your venison before?
I have not cooked with grape jelly. I've heard of people that have, though, but I have not. And yes, the inner loins are always the best eaten in the first. I mean, they're super tender and they're great. Okay, so real quick here, we're going to put our cheese in now. And I don't really measure anything, as you can see. There's no measuring involved in my kitchen, usually. So we'll just throw in some cheese. I just use shredded cheese. I don't really like mozzarella too much in this because it makes it way too stringy. Cheddar will work, Monterey Jack, stuff like that. So I'll throw in about that much cheese. We'll kind of get it melted. Put it right in here. Oh, we have a bigger pot. Okay. Get that incorporated. And then I'll just throw my macaroni in there. I do not like to overcook my pasta because if you overcook it, first of all, it's all squishy and mushy, and then when you put it in something that's warm, it continues to cook a little bit longer. So it's better to undercook it just slightly, and then it will be perfect when you put it in. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we'll just pour that in.
Matthew added a comment that blackberry jelly goes well. I'm perpetually fascinated by this jelly combination. I mean, it sounds kind of perfect, to be honest.
Well, I love to put raisins in my chili, so maybe it's kind of similar. Oh,
look at that.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to do was put my seasonings in. I love red pepper flakes. More the merrier. And just a little bit of salt and do a little bit of garlic powder because you can never have too much garlic. And then just kind of get it mixed together. Now from here, if you just want to eat it quick, throw your barbecued venison on and eat it that way. That's how I like to do it. But you can also stick it in a casserole dish and put it in the oven to crisp it up and make it, like a kind of crispy top.
That's how I like to do it.
Yep.
It's a perpetual fight in our house about which way to eat mac and cheese.
So I will just throw this. What I do, just throw it on top. Whenever it's shredded like this, I don't really like to mix it in too much until I eat it. It's just like a kind of one pot wonder dish. And spread it like that on top. And then when you dig in, you can just grab a scoop of the top as well. So,
wow,
that's what I do. I will quickly just show you another cut before we move on to the next segment. Turn my burners off so I don't burn this place down. Okay. I have a very small kitchen. I would love to get a bigger place, but I have this one little tiny counter here to do everything. So this is steaks from the rear leg of the deer. And these actually can be just laid in the pan, fried as is. Sometimes what I'll do is chunk them up first. So this is another way that I make the barbecued venison, is I will just chunk it up. And a cut like this, it's meant for steak, is usually really nice and tender, so it doesn't require slow cooking. Just chunk it up like that. And then what you can do is just throw it in, a pan like this with your barbecue sauce, and just give it a quick cook with the barbecue sauce. And then you have just chunks that you can incorporate into your mac and cheese. So that's another way to go about it. And I do this if I'm rushed for time and I didn't crock pot venison beforehand, because this does not require any time to do, or very little anyways. So just throw all that in there, and then you put your barbecue sauce on, mix it around, throw it in a skillet, and just cook it up, give it a quick cook. And something like this does not require long in the skillet. It's just a few minutes, if that. So, I did forget to.
Yum.
One thing I forgot to put in was the peppers and onions. I always put vegetables in my mac and cheese.
I was gonna say I usually try to sneak some in there as well. Some kale and peppers and onions is always a good addition.
Yep. There's always kale this time of year to be used up.
So we have a comment too from Sharon who says that they commonly marinate their steaks with orange juice, soy sauce, olive oil, and minced garlic for the day, and then they'll grill it at night. Yeah, it sounds delicious. And she also says they wrap their chunks in bacon and fry it, usually over an outside fire.
That's
which
cheating.
I don't know. Anytime you can add bacon into a dish, I think is gonna be is not necessarily cheating.
Well, for me, like I'm like super cheap. Like I do not like to spend money, so that's why I eat roadkills. Well, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why I eat roadkills. So I'm not going to go out and buy bacon, whenever I'm trying to save money by eating roadkills. So I try to
True.
Like, without like going out and buying meat, because all I eat is venison.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that mac and cheese. Katie says this, oh my God, this sounds delicious. I was telling Abby earlier that one of the worst parts about doing this show for me is I never am in the kitchen with the person making the delicious food. So I just have to watch it, and then I have to not enjoy it as I know they're enjoying it. So, Abby, I think what we're going to do is we're going to transfer over. I'm going to show everybody a quick side dish here that should be able to pair nicely, whether that's with your mac and cheese or whether that's with the heart and tongue that you're going to be showing later, or really any cut of wild game that you may be cooking up this winter or into the spring as well. So with that being said, I'm dropping a recipe right now in the chat. I am going to be showing you all just a quick version of Bubble and Squeak, which I am taking the recipe from the Vermont Harvest of the Month. And the Vermont Harvest of the Month is this great program that really just works to highlight local food that is popping up in Vermont throughout the various months. So without further ado, what I have right here on the stovetop is I have some little bit of bacon bits that I started frying while Abby was in the middle of cooking her wonderful and delicious mac and cheese. And I added some onions that we grew from our garden this past year. So I'm going to add some garlic into here, just cook it enough time just to kind of get that nice fragrant. Now you'll notice on the recipe that it basically just calls for onions, bacon, garlic, cabbage, and potatoes. But one of the nice things that I like about these types of recipes in this type of year is just those dark, delicious veggies that are coming up. I love the oranges and the greens and the purples. So I'm also going to throw some shredded carrots that I got from our winter CSA at Last Resort Farm. I'm just going to cook those up a little bit. And for folks who are perhaps interested in getting a winter CSA, you can find a lot of great information about farms who are hosting it at NOFA Vermont's Find Local Food database. And I will drop a link in there once I'm done cooking. So once I get these onions nice and cooked up, along with the bacon and the garlic and the carrots, what we're going to add next is our greens, right? So the recipe, again, calls for cabbage. I have this nice Savoy cabbage that came from the farm at VYCC in Richmond, Vermont. If y'all aren't familiar with them, they're doing really amazing work, not only teaching kids how to farm and how to work the working landscape, but they also have a lot of amazing programs, such as a pharmacy program where they're helping people get that fresh vegetables that they need in their diet, especially if they can't afford it, which is always so nice. So I'm going to throw the Savoy cabbage in here. We're just going to give it a stir. In our household, we eat cabbage basically starting when the Napa cabbage comes up in July through the next planting in springtime, because you just really can't beat having that kind of hearty green happening in your dishes, especially when the rest of everything is mostly just turnips and beets and rutabagas, which all have their place. But, if you were just trying to live off of a diet of root vegetables, I think that's how you get scurvy. So we're trying to throw some greens in there as well. And like I said, I like to kind of just use this dish as a catch-all for the vegetables that I find in my refrigerator. So this is just some nice dark green kale that I'm going to throw in there too. It really just serves as an extra color, some more leafy greens. I definitely pulled a Abby here with overloading my pan on the stove. So there's definitely some room that I could have left in here. But once these veggies cook up, and once you kind of just get them a little bit wilted, the bubble and squeak part of the dish comes from the potatoes. So before we started, I took some potatoes that we also grew in our garden, just some nice purple potatoes, and I boiled them off till they were nice and soft. The potatoes could also be coming from old mashed potatoes that you maybe had the night before. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the potatoes, and in your nice dish, you're going to just throw them in there. And you are going to kind of smash them in to your dish. So this is where the fun part gets, because you're going to take this heat as you smash it in, and usually you have some less greens in here, but you're going to smash this in, and then you're just going to kind of let this sit and cook and start to catch on the bottom of that cast iron. So as that catches on the bottom of the cast iron, that's kind of where you get that bubble and squeak part, because the cabbage should start squeaking a little bit as it cooks up along with the potatoes. And you're just going to get some nice, hard, crispy bits along with some of that soft, delicious cabbage. And really, this dish is just a perfect accompaniment with any red meats, any wild foods that you might be collecting. And it's a wonderful way to support our local farmers who, let's be honest, they really stepped up big, especially as the pandemic kind of threw us all back on our heels. And they've been feeding our communities and been working super hard to make sure that we all stay fed with yummy and delicious food. So basically, you're just going to sit here and you're going to let this cook. I have this on a medium to medium high heat. And as Abby said, this doesn't really require a recipe. You kind of just do it as you feel and cook it for as long as you want. Some spices that you can add in here. I added some salt earlier, some cracked black pepper, along with some, of course, red pepper flakes, as I think has been one of the themes running for the whole entire Vermont Wild Kitchen episode. And with that, I'm gonna drop the NOFA link in the chat, and I'm gonna throw it back to Abby, who is going to be showing us how to prepare some tongue and some venison heart. So with that, let me get you up on this. And there we go. I also, we do have a question, Abby, from Tyler, who asks, what resources are available to claim roadkill meat?
So if you see a deer laying on the side of the road, all you have to do is call State Police Dispatch or your local warden, and they'll give you a case number for it, and you can take it. Just make sure you call first, because obviously you can't possess a large game like that without approval and without the number. Another way you can go about it is ask your warden, your local warden, say, hey, I'd love to have some roadkill. If you come across a deer, can you put me on your list? So I have a list of people that I give roadkills to now and again, so that's another way. Okay, so we'll get right into it. I have a heart here. And you can actually, you don't have to prepare heart right away. You can freeze it like this. One thing, though, I will mention before we get started. Put that right there. Let's go over to the sink, actually. So you'll see here, the top of this heart has a lot of kind of, well, not a lot of fat, but a lot of fat for a wild animal is around the top. There's the valves, the arteries, all that stuff. If you kind of open it up, you'll see there's ventricles, atrium, all that in there. So when you first cut the heart out of the animal, before you freeze it, a good idea is to rinse it out so that you don't have blood clots. So what you do is you'll just get a kind of gentle stream of water and kind of run it through and then kind of squeeze it like that. I've already cleaned this one, so you won't see a whole lot of blood coming out of it. You can kind of just put it in different arteries. You don't want your water too strong because you'll get squirted right in the face because it'll shoot out one side. You can see it's going in there, it's coming out there, so it's coming out clean. So we got a nice clean heart to work with. Squeeze it out, and then bring it back over to the. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is just cut off all this stuff on the top. Just cut straight down like that. There's a little bit of meat there, but most of it is just stuff you don't. It's chewy and tough, and you can't really eat that. So we'll set that aside. Then flip it over like this, and then gently carve off the fat that you see on the outside around the top. And this is typically the easiest way to do it. The whole heart itself has a very thin membrane on it. So if you can get that off, that's great, but especially towards the top where it's tougher. And that's why I'm kind of doing it like along the edge like this, trying to get some of that off. You don't have to get it all off though. So we'll kind of scoop that to the side. And this is how you clean a heart. This is called cleaning the heart. Cut off that. Okay, so now you have the tops cut off. It's kind of trimmed around the sides and edges here. Do a little more here. And it really pays to have a sharp knife for this. Butter knife's not going to work. Okay, so now you can really see the insides. We have this kind of thin flap here and then a thicker wall here. So what you want to do is find kind of the thinnest spot right there and then just kind of cut it open right along that edge. So we cut that and then find where it ends, which is right there, and then just cut it straight off. So you have one piece of meat there. Then you have the thick wall. So you just find wherever it's thinnest, which is about right there, and just cut straight down through and open that up. So you see what we have here is the heartstrings. These little things are called, well, I call them the heartstrings. I'm not sure if that's the scientific term for it, but you'll want to cut those out because they're really ropey and tough. You do not want those in there. So we'll cut them out, put them to the side. Makes it easier. You can just cut this thing right in half like that because we'll be cubing it up anyways. And then cut that off. You do lose a tiny bit of meat doing this, but it's better than chewing on these things all night. Okay, so we got it pretty much cleaned up now. You see we have like 3 pieces of 2 thick pieces, 1 thin piece. Some people will just cook this as a steak, which you can do if you want to marinate it or just put some salt and pepper on it, fry it in some oil in a cast iron skillet. That's a popular method. But what I'm going to show you how to do tonight is make shish kebabs with it, which is one of my favorite ways to cook heart. I like spicy food, so we'll just cut them into strips and then chunk it up like that into pieces that are small enough for a shish kebab. I like my shish kebabs to be small pieces of stuff so that it cooks fast. So I'll chunk it up. And heart has a different consistency to it than normal striated muscle. It's not tough, but it's kind of bouncy, if you know what I mean. It's just kind of like, it's tender but bouncy. It's the best way I can describe it. Okay, so once you have all that chunked up, actually we'll use this, I had the barbecue in here, but it's okay. Throw it in here. And so my secret ingredient, you don't have to use this ingredient, but I love how it tastes with heart. So you could just use pepper, Worcestershire sauce, all that stuff, a little bit of oil, which I plan to do. But I'm also going to put in a few of these, and these are chipotle peppers and adobo sauce. And these things have a really smoky flavor to them. They're delicious. So I'll do probably, actually it's probably a little too much for that little bit of heart, but they're pretty spicy sometimes. You get a lot of them in there. So you want to cut those up really finely. Just all over. Actually, I might add some more. I want it to be really spicy. And then throw it in on top of your heart. The amount is really kind of up to you. And then we'll put a little bit of the juice in there too. Okay. Next, I'll give a splash of Worcestershire sauce. Whoa, that was a little more than a splash. I took off the regulator on the top. Maybe a little bit of
Living on the wild side.
a little bit of soy sauce, not too much because soy sauce is really salty and you might get more than you bargained for there. I don't know if I need to add more red pepper. I think we're probably good with the hot. And where's my, oh, there it is. Garlic powder. Where's the honey? Where do you put the honey? Oh. And a little bit of honey. This is homegrown honey from my boyfriend Tyler, who's filming. He just got into the bee business, so he is making some really good honey, and I just like to eat this stuff like it's going out of style. So I'll just put.
If you all want to send some my way, I'd be happy to help eat it as well.
It's the best honey ever. Oh. So I'll just put a little bit of that just to add a little bit of sweetness, and then I'll lick the spoon. Okay. Mix it up. And you know, you can let this marinate. The longer you let it marinate, the more it's going to take on the flavor. But we don't have a whole lot of time tonight on this thing, so I'm not going to let it marinate too long. And you know, you don't have to make shish kebabs with this. You could fry it in the pan just like this, and it would be delicious. But I love to make shish kebabs with heart. It's just like the perfect little chunks, you know, for that. So I have my sticks over here. The first time I ever made shish kebabs, I did not soak the sticks. And if you don't soak the sticks for a few hours in water, you will not have any sticks left when you try to take your stuff off the grill. They burn right up, which most people know, but I didn't know that, apparently. So also for veggies, I just chunked up some zucchini, a little bit of onion chunks, and peppers. So we'll throw them in here, and I like to just drizzle it with oil and mix it up, and then some salt and pepper. Maybe some
And if you wanted to make this a kind of winter-focused dish, you could also chunk up some root vegetables and steam them or boil them off too before throwing them on the sticks.
Yeah.
To where you can finish them off too, or you can marinate them right along with the venison.
Yeah, you just would want to make sure you cook them a little bit beforehand because the venison only takes like a few minutes, you know, to cook. Whereas a root vegetable, you know, unless you parboil it first, it's going to take a lot longer than that.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm kind of showing these, because these types of vegetables don't take long. Peppers and zucchini, they're done same time the meat is. Okay. And then what I'll do is just take, and I would let this marinate longer, like I was saying before. Oh, and I forgot one other thing to mix in there. These are chicken of the woods that I collected. So it's mushroom. Grows all over the place around here. Bright orange.
Where did you find those?
Well, these were from Shrewsbury, this particular batch, but they grow all over the place around where I am. I find them all the time. I found I don't know, I had to have been at least 50 or 100 pounds of them growing in this tree, but I only took a quarter of it. But I actually freeze them, so I'll cut them into strips like this, and then just put them in a big pot, put a little bit of oil in there, and then saute them just briefly, and then throw them in a Ziploc and freeze them, and they keep really well that way. And then
for folks who aren't necessarily familiar with chicken of the woods, it grows on hardwood trees that are generally dead or dying. So you could see them popping up after a rain all around the state.
Yep. They seem to like ash a lot. Ash trees. And oak.
Oh, nice. I mostly have found them on maple.
Okay. Yeah, maple is another good one for oysters. Oyster mushrooms. They love dying maple trees. So yeah, this is just, obviously most people know how to put shish kebabs together, but just alternate it with whatever you have. Oh, forgot to put the onions on. And then you can just grill these. Another fun thing to do is if you want to have an adventure outside, just bring these along and make a campfire and roast them over the fire, over like a fire out in the woods. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, shish kebabs are the ultimate to-go food.
Yep. So there we have it. Spicy heart shish kebabs. And then you can just fry those up. So I will jump right into kind of button this stuff up and deal with this later. But I'll jump right into the tongue.
It's a shame you all are gonna have food for days now stacked up in your fridge.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's the problem I have is I cook like way too much all at once because I come from a big family. I had five siblings in my family, so we would like just cook a monster amount, and I'm so used to doing that. So then I end up eating it instead.
It's a hard habit to break. The whole scale thing is still something to be able to crack that code.
Okay, so the tongue. I think did you put the recipes up for people to see?
I have not yet, but I will drop them in, and I'm trying to figure out how to get them linked at some point.
So the tongue, this is actually a moose tongue, which is why it looks so big. But you can do this with any tongue. You can do it with venison tongue, moose tongue, whatever tongue you have available. But the first thing that I do, and I call this like, it's almost like deli meat. It almost tastes like that, the way I do it. So I'll brine the tongue for 5 days. And the way you make your brine is do like 4 cups of water, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of, in the recipes here, 1 cup of salt. And then you add some spices, allspice berries, peppercorns, mustard seed, coriander seed, bay leaf, and some cloves. And you bring that to, you heat that up so that it kind of incorporates in, and then you add 6 more cups, 8 more cups of cold water just to cool it down and add volume. And then you stick your tongue in once it's cool. Not your tongue, but the tongue from your animal. You put in there, stick it in the fridge for 5 days, let it sit, and that's the brine. Then you'll take that out. Oh, and I also forgot to add that you will put in some vegetables like onions and garlic and celery as well in that brine with it to add flavor. Then you take your tongue out and you put it in a crock pot with water and the solids that you took out of the brine, which are the vegetables. And you'll slow cook that for about, it depends on how high heat you do it, but it's typically, slow cook for about 8 hours or 5 to 8 hours. And then you'll take it out and it will look like this. And then this is the part that you got to kind of get hands on with. So the outer layer here of the tongue peels off. This is super important. This is tough. So you do not want this to stay on. But look at that. It's like the most satisfying thing ever. It's like when I was a kid, I used to put glue, like Elmer's glue on my hands just so that I could peel it off because it was so much fun. So I enjoy this part.
So basically you're trying to tell us that you're preparing yourself to be able to peel a tongue your whole entire life.
Exactly, yes. Well, look at that. Isn't that just great? Oh, I love it. So then
it's funny, and I feel I'm hesitant to mention this to you, but how I cooked the last time I had a tongue, I cooked it by wrapping it in bacon and then slow smoking it for a couple of hours.
Yeah, bacon's cheating because bacon tastes good. Like bacon tastes so good that it doesn't matter what you could wrap anything in bacon and it would taste good. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the point. Yes.
No, okay. So look at this meat here. People think this is gross and weird, but this is. It tastes like it's like pot roast. It's like the most delicious pot roast you've ever tasted. It's so good. And like my great aunt used to make this, and she'd make tongue sandwiches. She didn't brine hers first. She would just boil it and then peel it off like that, and then slice it thin and make sandwiches because she didn't do anything fancy. But I like to brine it because it tastes a little more like deli meatish kind of because it has that flavoring. So then what I'll do is I'll take it over. I'm gonna flip this over because we have cooked meat here. Okay. take this away. This is butter on it. We'll lay our tongue down, and then it's super easy. You just cut it into, actually, I need a better knife. Let me wash this off.
Tongue also makes a great taco. I have been always loved seeing tongue on the menu. And, it's not just venison or moose tongue that you can get too. Beef tongue is pretty widely available, and there's tons of great farmers out there in Vermont that are raising some great cattle too.
Exactly. Yep. And not a lot of people know about this stuff or like it, but it is so tender, and like it has a very unique flavor. I mean, it really doesn't taste like any other part of the animal. But you can take that, you could pan fry that to add a little crunch to it, and use it in sandwiches just like you would deli meat. The best combination with tongue, I think, is mustard and maybe some pickled vegetables, like some pickled onions or pickles, or anything like that. I also like to put it on crackers. So this is kind of like an hors d'oeuvre. If you want to do a fancy hors d'oeuvre for your next dinner party, which probably is non-existent because of COVID, but or if you just want to do something fancy for your family, take that out. Let me grab the pickles here.
If I have ever seen an Instagram worthy shot, I don't know what else it would be but that.
Oh, look, it's a heart. Isn't that cute? Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oops. And then put a little squirt of that on there. Spicy mustard and a homemade pickle if I can find it. There's one. And then this right here is delicious.
Again, always so jealous. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm excited for my bubble and squeak, but it's not tongue hors d'oeuvres by any means.
This is good.
Thank you so much for that, Abby. That was such a wonderful demonstration. And I think that even for folks maybe who have been doing this for years, they don't even think necessarily about using the tongue or the heart in any concerted way. But obviously it's so delicious, and there's just so much wonderful food out there. So I posted those recipes in our chat, so you can see the spicy venison heart kebabs and also the pickled deli meat tongue sandwich in the chat. And to close this out, I'm going to just demonstrate for you all just a quick, wonderful cocktail as it is starting to get below freezing on a consistent basis. So I am doing just a little bit of a riff on a hot toddy. I have this wonderful tea here from Piece of Earth Farm called Tree Tea. And if you can't find the actual tea, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's balsam, spruce, tulsi, and some sage just all mixed together. And it just makes this wonderful, wonderful tea that almost feels like you're drinking the forest. So I've been letting that steep for about 5 minutes just to make that going. I'm going to throw a cinnamon stick in there. So your normal hot toddy would just include some hot water, some possibly cloves, and some anise, and some cinnamon, some of those warming spices. You're going to do about a half of an ounce of lemon juice, which is, I would say, approximately half a lemon or so, give or take. Really just do it to however you feel. And again, the normal hot toddy would usually be used with honey, but I'm going to use some rooted in Vermont maple syrup. So this is from Hillsborough Sugar Works, and it is organic maple syrup that you can find in Bristol. But I know you all have your favorite maple sugar, your favorite sugar maker. So you're going to do about a half an ounce of maple syrup in 1 glass, and that is about 1 tablespoon, just in case you're wondering. And really, for the hot toddy, I'm going to use bourbon. So I got some Jim Beam bourbon, but you could use any type of dark liquor that you want, whether that's rum, bourbon, or whatever else you have on. So you're going to do about 1.5 ounces, which is about 3 tablespoons. And honestly, you really can't beat a hot toddy on a cold winter night. It's not only does it warm you to the bones, but it's supposed to also keep you pretty healthy. So I am not responsible for any medical advice, though, that we're dishing out. Or, as Abby said, if you actually stick your tongue in the boiling water while trying to make this. So, folks, well, actually, we should probably taste this and see how it is. Yes, that is so wonderful. It just has that like effervescence of spruce and balsam just pulsing through. So with that, folks, we're going to wrap up the Vermont Wild Kitchen. I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. We are very excited to be kicking this off, and this is going to become a monthly affair where we're going to be doing an episode every third Thursday of the month. Next month, I believe we're going to be diving in on some walleye with a couple of folks from Vermont Fish and Wildlife. And I guess leaving from here, I just want to say thank you to Game Warden Abby Sarah for inviting us into the kitchen, showing us some wonderful ways to cook up venison. We also want to give a big thank you to Tyler, who's been holding the camera behind the scenes. Oh, there he is, and he has a rockin' mustache as well. So we're all. Tyler in the comments asked where you can find that tea blend. I know you can find it at the Buffalo Mountain Co-op in Hardwick. You can also reach out to Piece of Earth Farm if you look them up on Facebook. So aside from that, tune in next month. We'll have a nice couple episodes. Feel free to share this with your friends and family. If you are cooking up some wonderful wild dishes yourself, especially with rifle season, right in the middle of rifle season, share that on Instagram and hashtag Rooted in Vermont or VT Wild Kitchen, and we'll share those out with our audience. And in the meantime, feel free to send us a message, send us your recipes, and, be safe out there in the woods, be safe with each other, and enjoy your time for the winter and this hunting season. So with that being said, I wish everybody a lot of health, and we will see you in 1 month. So thank you again.